All right, well, Chris Popper, I'm joined by filmmaker extraordinaire Peter Logue. Peter, you graduated from MDI High School how long ago?
I graduated from MDI in 2010, and then I went to college at University of Connecticut, and I've been back here on MDI making films ever since.
Okay, and some of the films that you've produced are what?
I refer to them as portrait-style documentaries. For the most part, I've made a lot of these short films that tell the stories of one or two or a group of people here in Down East Maine. And this has been a really cool project, looking into the past and seeing a lot of, similar themes to the people that live on this island and in this area today.
All right, so the film we're talking about is The Fire of 47, which is making its premiere at the Criterion when?
The premiere for The Fire of 47 is October 1st at 2 p.m. at the Criterion.
Okay. For those, I came to the Bar Harbor Historical Society, which is where we're taping this, last year and got a great tour from Debbie. And I had never known about the fire prior to this. Give everybody a brief little history lesson of the Fire of 47.
Well, I've learned so much about the fire through doing research for this film, and most importantly, hearing the stories of about 20 eyewitness accounts of the people that were here for the fire. And it's interesting because, growing up on MDI, it's a story that everyone knows a little bit about, and everyone has sort of their own version of the events, and that's really cool. But for me, I wanted to sort of really try to figure out the best that I could and the best that we could here at the Historical Society what exactly happened. So my main primary source for research was the fire report written by Chief David Sleeper in the aftermath of the fire. And that text from that fire report has been turned into the narration for the film, which was narrated by Steve Zernkelton, the great Steve Zernkelton.
Right.
Yeah, so he's sort of serving as the voice of Chief David Sleeper in the film. And so that was important for me to have that as sort of our structural guideline of the film, and using the fire report to basically walk our audience through the events of the fire, which in a nutshell, it was the driest summer and driest year in 200 years in Maine. There were forest fires all up and down the coast, and Bar Harbor was hit October 17th, and it was a small fire at Dollar's Dump, which is up on the Crooked Road, and basically it just continued to grow, and then the real big day where the fire came into Bar Harbor was October 23rd, and it was an all-hands-on-deck situation. I know both of my grandfathers came down from Bangor, so I grew up hearing their stories of coming down to help fight the fire, and they weren't firemen at all.
When you think about it, back in 47, it took a little longer than an hour than it does today to get down to Bar Harbor.
Yeah.
And I mean, the equipment's certainly not to the capabilities of today in terms of firefighting apparatus, but to bring down equipment and men from Bangor, I mean, just shows you the severity of the fire on the island.
Yeah, I mean, there were people from all different fire departments from all over eastern Maine that came, and also a lot of the guys here on the island just became firefighters, and we have a lot of cool stories in the film. One of my favorites is Jack Tracy, who was 16 years old, and he was released from school at lunch, Northeast Harbor Middle School, and just signed up and became a firefighter for the week. And he did all sorts of crazy things. He was just right in the middle of it, and that was the case for so many people on the island. They had incredible firefighters, but it also was just a lot of people who cared a lot about this town and this island that were put in this situation, and they said, the whole island is at risk here. That was absolutely on the table. All of Bar Harbor burning, all of MDI burning, for an entire week. That was how high the stakes were, and so when called upon, they answered. A lot of these guys had fought in World War II as well. So I think it was a combination of things.
It's that greatest generation. Absolutely. Without any question.
No, it's unbelievable what they did. I mean, and not just the firefighters, but the telephone operators. They were heroic in their own right, because if the telephone operators had decided they wanted to evacuate when the evacuation order came down on the 23rd, there would have been no telephone communications on the island. That includes the firemen trying to talk to each other, if Chief Sleeper needed to call the Coast Guard or anything like that, they wouldn't have been able to do that. And they refused.
When you think back at that point, there were still, I would think, party lines, and it was the old put the wire into this one and connect it to there, and you picked up the phone and said, "Operator, connect me to so and so."
Yeah, and they refused to be evacuated, and they
unsung
stayed
heroes
at their station. And yeah, it's something that a lot of people that were there talk a lot about, and Chief Sleeper talks a lot about in his report, is that it's impossible to name one hero from the fire, or even one sort of category of hero. There were the firemen who were phenomenal and so brave and courageous, but the kids, taking their bikes into the national park and delivering sandwiches to the men who were fighting their fires there, they were heroes too. And the people who were making extra trips back to the island to rescue the pets and take them off the island, and everywhere you look, there's incredible stories of heroism, and in the sort of quiet way that we find in Maine a lot, where no one was looking for glory, no one was getting paid for this. Everyone just said, okay, and a lot of businesses shut down for the week in order so that it was all hands on deck, as I said. Like, it was...
Well, it was protect and preserve the island.
Yeah, and the national park flew in all sorts of their people, like their firefighting experts, because Acadia was at huge risk, and they coordinated well with Chief Sleeper. And a lot of the fires that happened in Maine that year, from what I've heard from people who went to go volunteer in other ones, they said it was, pretty chaotic, unorganized. And in the case of Bar Harbor, everyone got here and took orders from Chief Sleeper, who was calm, composed, and ready to go. This wasn't a completely random event. They had been braced for this. They had been training for some sort of catastrophic fire event as a result of how dry. It hadn't rained in 6 months. And there was a series of unfortunate events in a way that happened that led to the fire being as catastrophic as it was. But perhaps most notable is that on the 23rd, there were 70-mile-an-hour winds.
Hurricane force winds.
Yeah, hurricane force winds. And so, the fire was jumping hundreds of feet at a time. And but even with that, with the fire being as strong as it was, the firefighters were very, very smart in the way that they fought it. There were techniques that they used to make, stands to try to protect certain areas of Bar Harbor, downtown. And we had thousands of people that were at the pier waiting for evacuation from boats. And there were firefighters that, put wet blankets on their shoulders and were ready to do whatever they had to do to try to prevent the fire from coming into town. And ultimately, we were able to succeed in that.
How long did it take for you to make the film?
It's been about 6 months of working on this project. And originally, it was just an idea that I had, and I brought it to Debbie Dyer here at the Historical Society, knowing that the 70th anniversary of the fire is coming up this October. And they were really excited about it. And Kim Swan, who's the executive producer of the film, was super passionate about the fire as well in Bar Harbor history in general. So the three of us have worked together on this project very closely. And I've, we sort of put out an open call to the public, because there were a handful of people that we knew we really wanted to be in the film. Like, we had, for either Debbie knew them personally, or I had heard secondhand stories about this person who, was running the canteen in the Village Green, or came home from Maine to fight the fire. And so we personally asked a few people, but then for the most part, we put the ask out to the community through the newspaper and through internet and whatnot. And a lot of people came to the museum here, and I would just sit down with them and I would have them tell me their story, and it was just so moving, because once people would get going, I could tell this is a story that, it was 70 years ago, but something that is still a big part of them.
Right. So again, this is the data for the premiere, and then how can people see it if they can't get to the Criterion that day?
So yeah, the film premieres October 1st, and then I know that the Historical Society will be selling DVD copies of the film moving forward, and then hopefully we'll do some more screenings at some point as well.
All right, so what time on October 1st?
It is 2 o'clock at the Criterion Theatre in Bar Harbor, And yeah, we're hoping to have a great crowd. We're going to have a lot of our cast members
Yeah.
in attendance. We'll have a red carpet situation going on.
Very cool.
And it should be a great time.
Where can people get tickets?
They can get tickets by calling the Bar Harbor Historical Society, and they'll take care of that.
All right, so all the tickets are being sold through the Historical Society, or the Criterion selling some?
I believe they're both
Both?
selling tickets.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So, but definitely encourage people to get tickets in advance, because
You'd like it to be sold out.
yeah, definitely. And there's already been a few hundred reservations.
Oh,
so.
very cool. Very cool.
Yeah,
All right.
it's a story that is a big part of this community, and it's really exciting to see all these people just having the opportunity to share their story, and for me to be able to preserve them is a real honor.
All right. Anything we're missing here? Probably not.
No, I don't think so.
All right.
Yeah, I wanted to mention Steve, and I mean, he's just amazing.
You got that
so
major talented voice that's doing the emceeing there, the narration.
Yeah, I mean, he was just incredible to work with, and so generous to want to be involved with this project. And so we were really excited to have Steve Zernkill on board. And then the other members of the cast are just people that, in a lot of cases, have lived there for their entire lives, and people that are in their 80s and 90s. And also, one thing that I was really moved by was seeing how many of the young men who became volunteer firefighters out of the desperate situation in 1947 actually after that decided to become volunteer firefighters and remained so for the next 50, 60 years. That happened multiple times.
And there's a need now. I mean, you look at the fire station. I'm going to the Trenton Volunteer Fire Department for breakfast tomorrow morning, but I mean, they have a constant need, as do the other fire departments throughout the island and Ellsworth and the community. I mean, there's a real need for firefighters.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's important to support the volunteer firefighters and the fire departments that we have here, because it's an incredible service they do for our community.
All right, perfect. Okay, so again, the Fire of 47, October 1st, 2 o'clock at the Criterion Theatre. All right, thanks for watching. Check out all the other videos we have on the WDEA YouTube channel.